passion and pageantry of college football lives here. This is the Paul Finebaum Show, Hour 2 podcast.
This might be college football heaven.
We are back. Everybody has been talking about it, talked about it before, and still talking about it. That's what happened in Tuscaloosa Saturday afternoon, the biggest game of the year in college basketball. And Auburn got its swagger back. Peter Rauterkus joins us from Mail.com, covered the game. And Peter, thank you very much for the time. Great to see you again. So Auburn walks out of there a big winner, number one team in the country. That is not in dispute. So tell us what you saw and what you heard before, during, and after the game. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me. Like you said, 1 versus 2, first ever 1 versus 2 in SEC history. It was, I think, just a game where Auburn kind of got to prove itself again. There were some questions about, whether they were still number one after the loss to Florida last weekend. And now, talk about going into a road atmosphere, playing against Alabama, a team that's number 2 in the country, number 1 in the coaches poll, and got a lot of AP votes. And, Auburn went in there, and not only did they win, but they never trailed throughout the game. They were in control for most of it. And I think the overall sentiment afterward was, I think it's just very clear who the number 1 team is, in the country and the SEC. And I think Auburn now has a very tight grip on the number 1 overall seed, with Selection Sunday getting closer and closer.
Peter, talk about the strategy that went in, because, listen, Auburn played well, but it looked like Bruce Pearl dialed up literally a nearly perfect game.
Yeah, no, I think what I was most impressed with was how Auburn looked defensively. Seeing that clip right there, Denver Jones had 16 points, but, Bruce Pearl really harped on after the game about how effective Denver Jones was defensively, particularly on Alabama's guard, Mark Sears. Sears obviously has been one of the best players in the country for a couple years now. And I want to say had 18 points Saturday, but was held to 4 of 17 shooting. And a lot of that was Denver Jones, who has been, Auburn's best perimeter defender all season. And, Alabama, they kind of helped shut down Alabama offense that, still scored 85 points in the game, but was held to just 1.076 points per possession, which is really low for an Alabama team that came into the game second in KenPom and adjusted offensive efficiency. And, they were inefficient from the field, shot 5 for 26 from 3. So really impressed with what Auburn did defensively. And then offensively, Auburn's been, the best offensive team in the country, many people would say, this season. I think they just continued that, hit a lot of big shots. Alabama played some drop coverage, and, Auburn, some guys like Cheney Johnson, Jani Broome in the front court stepped up and hit some big 3-pointers. And, that was huge. And, just on both sides of the ball, they answered the bell.
Peter, Auburn has had an amazing couple of years with the Final Four in 19, but last year they were humming along, won the tournament, and then literally got bounced out before we even knew they had played a game. What is the mindset of this team as we are now under 3 weeks, 4 weeks away from the NCAA tournament?
I think there's a feeling among a lot of people that this is kind of the year. It's rare, in college basketball nowadays that you have so much experience the way Auburn does. There's a lot of transfer on this team, but most of the contributors are guys that have been in the program for multiple years. Jani Broome has been there 3 years. Denver Jones, like I mentioned, he's been there 2. Chad Baker-Mazara has been there 2. Dylan Cardwell has been there 5. You just have so much. The team's talented. There's no question about that. But there's so much experience, not just playing college basketball, but playing together. And I think that's been huge for this team. It's a lot of guys who are unselfish as well. This one thing that I've been really impressed with is just how well everybody on this team plays their role and how clearly defined the roles have been since the start of the season. And I think when you have all of that going, it works, and we've seen that. And I think you put all that together and it creates a team that has maybe the best chance to win a championship that we've seen from Auburn.
In terms of concern, the schedule speaks for itself. Every schedule in the SEC is hard, but Auburn seems particularly difficult, including a road game at Arkansas coming up, a tough place for anyone to play. Realistically, I realize none of us are soothsayers, but how do you think Auburn manages the next few weeks before it gets to Nashville?
Yeah, I mean, every game of the SEC is tough, and I think the biggest thing for this Auburn team is kind of something you don't have a lot of control over, and that's staying healthy. I mean, they've dealt with injuries this season. Janai Broom, their best player, missed some time, and he's still a little bit banged up with the ankle. Chad Baker-Mazara is another one. Hasn't started the last couple of days because he's been banged up, dealing with some minor injuries. So, I mean, that's what's going to be really important for this team, but also tough is just kind of staying healthy through this last stretch and getting into the postseason unscathed. Right now for Auburn, they kind of, like I mentioned earlier, they've got a tight grip on that number one overall seed. They've got a tight grip on the SEC. It's just kind of about getting through this last stretch, continuing to take care of business, which they have been, and, just staying healthy.
And of course, we'll see Alabama again on March 8th. Just psychologically, though, Peter, winning there. I mean, we could all see it in Pearl's demeanor, his disposition. I mean, he was genuinely excited. He wasn't worried about anything other than getting out of there with that victory. How would you describe Pearl right now, his moment in time?
Yeah, I mean, he's, people have talked about this ever since he's become the head coach at Auburn, just what he's done with that program. I mean, it's an Auburn program that, has some history, but has never really been a powerhouse or had a whole lot of sustained success. And, we look what Bruce Pearl's done, particularly over the last 5 years, and now has a team that's, number one team in the country. Has been that for, I think, the last 6 weeks. I mean, it's something that, I don't think many people expected to happen, but it's something that, I think you just have to give the credit to him and just what he's done from a recruiting standpoint, from just the interest in the program that he's drummed up in the last 10, 11 years. I mean, it's huge. And I think, Saturday was just another example of just how far it's come, how big the program is now. And I think, just looking at the rest of the season, they got a couple more big road games. They got to go to Kentucky in a couple of weeks. They've had, I think part of what's gotten them to this point is you look at this season, just the non-conference schedule. They went and beat Houston, not at Houston, but, in Houston. They went and won Maui. This team is just, it's the way they're built and what they've gone through this season. A lot of that is Bruce Pearl's doing. It's gotten to where they are now.
Peter, many thanks. Always good to connect with you, Peter Rauterkus, covering the Auburn Tigers, the number one team in America, with an exclamation point. We'll take a short break here. Much more to come.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
We're back, and Will is up next in Birmingham. Hey, Will.
Hey, what's going on, Paul? How are you?
We are doing great. Thank you.
Paul, I'm a transplant here, and I worked for you when you were in Birmingham and came to support you when you were honored at the University of Alabama to the School of Communications Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much, Will.
So I got a quick question for you, though, Paul. It seems like there's a lot of complaints out of the SEC about saying that I guess money is driving college football. But, the past 10 years, the SEC has been running college football, basically. And, now that the money's above the table, there's a lot of complaints going on. But these complaints weren't going on when over the last 10-plus years when the SEC was running college football. Why is it an issue now?
It's a good question. You're right. I mean, the SEC has been at the epicenter of college football now really for close to 20 years. And yeah. I think this whole Big Ten thing is really interesting, and I know a lot of folks have leaped and lavished heavy praise. I think it's more of a defense mechanism than it is anything else. I'm not sure college football is going to be better because you have two superpowers dictating everything. But the hypocrisy part of it is fairly humorous. I completely concur with where you are on that.
Okay, good. Because I was telling my buddies, I said, hey, listen, this is like, the SEC fans remind me of like a drug dealer, a guy that sells pot. He gets mad because it's legal now, so now he doesn't make the he can no make listen, the money.
I feel funny even talking about it because so many people think I am the head spokesperson for the league, which I'm not, by the way. But yeah, I mean, I've always been one, as you know, who has who has struggled with hypocrisy.
Right.
And there's plenty to go around right now.
Exactly, Paul. Listen, thanks for taking my call, and I wish you the best.
Hey, great to hear from you, and thank you very, very much. I mean, why is the SEC doing some of the things it's doing right now? I laid it out a minute ago. It's a defense mechanism. You can't look at this through the same prism that maybe you could have years ago. There's a lot of this stuff that you may not like, but you have to protect your turf. That's really, I mean, we're no longer about college sports. It's like you got a neighborhood in Queens, and you're worried about what's going on over at Staten Island, so you have a meeting at an Italian restaurant, and you reach a deal. And the deal is that the SEC is the most powerful league, and the Big Ten is the only conference at or equal to it. So you join forces to make sure that your philosophy is enacted, as opposed to the little guys on the block who have gotten, in many respects, a free ride. Just look at the last CFP. Just listen to Ari Wasserman talk. Johnny is up next. Hey, Johnny.
Hey, that's called being straight through. It went from ringing right to you. But one thing I was wanting to bring up about what Ross Dellinger said and about these the 9 games and all that. But he was saying that the Big Ten had X amount of teams and the SEC had X amount of teams, and he had looked back for 10 or 12 years as a way of justifying that. But that data is not comparable anymore to the last 3 or 4 years, don't you think? I mean, if you can't compare anything before NIL and try to justify that today. Do you think that's right?
That is correct.
All right. Glad to get that out of the way. And Alabama lost by 9, and that's how many free throws they missed. You can be cold from three-point land, but there's no sense in getting beat from the free throw line. Another strange thing, I was in Birmingham earlier. This guy was down there. He was giving out flowers, and he had on a UConn jersey and an Auburn hat. I went over to him and I said, "Hey, aren't you Stacy?" He said, yeah, you're Johnny B. I said, yeah. I said, what in the world? I thought you was an Alabama fan and a South Carolina fan. You ain't nothing but he's a fan's vestite, Paul. He don't know what he is.
Hold on, you're talking about Stacy here?
Stacy is a fan's vestite. I just said it. Whatever's hot, that's who he's going with. He don't have no business being no fan of nothing with them weak calls and giving men flowers, and now whatever team's hot, he'll call in. And I busted him. I should have got a picture of that. But one other thing, the judge brought up a great point about the clock. You need to get a clock for him. 1 minute of that crap is all we need to hear. I don't know. I wasn't even
hey, by the way, in terms of the judge today, I think you noticed there was a change of philosophy in the call. And I really just wanted to see what the judge sounded like, Johnny, without me interfering. And I realized I made a mistake.
I'm glad that you admit it, Paul.
It's not a matter of me interfering. It's just a matter of me not taking his calls.
He admitted that he had made mistakes, and see, now you're a man and you're made.
Yeah, but one thing I don't think. But Johnny, do we need a recantation on this program of the mistakes people made in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s? I mean, I prefer being in the moment. Hey, by the way, the artist formerly known as Stacy, the South Carolina women's fan, is up next.
Hey, Paul, I tell you what about Johnny B. Johnny B, go sit in the closet, close the door, and bump your head, and don't be seen never again. Do that, Johnny B. Now, let me tell you something about Auburn real quick. Auburn beat Alabama. You got Bruce Pearl riding in the car having a good time. Keep the same energy, you Auburn fans. Keep the same energy, Bruce Pearl, because guess what? Bama going to still go farther in the tournament than Auburn going to go. They can't win the big game. Now, let me say something about my girls. You got UCLA, you got Texas, and you got UConn. Gino, Gino at UConn, keep the same energy because my girls are coming back. I'd rather for us to lose these games now than get in the tournament and lose them. But we coming back. Everybody got something to say about Stacy from Birmingham and who Stacy from Birmingham root for. Don't worry about me. Worry about yourself. Stop talking about stuff that you don't know about. And like I said again, Paul Finebaum, you still my guy. You're going to always be my guy. But you need to correct this because you started all this nonsense, Paul Finebaum. You started all the nonsense. But you know what I'm going to do? When you get to Birmingham, I'm coming to the show live. I'm coming to the show live so we can go and settle this once and for all. And AJ, I know what I said. I said roll tide and Gamecock proud. I said that. But let me put emphasis on this. I'm talking about South Carolina women's basketball. That's it. I ain't talking about nobody else. Okay? Is that understood, Paul?
Yes, sir. And I will see you soon. So I want to go back to the first topic of conversation today. When we had Dellinger on talking about this meeting later in the week between the SEC and the Big Ten, moving to 9 games, getting automatic qualifiers, I've alluded to how the reaction I believe will be, and I'm pretty confident of this, knowing some of the other people from different leagues. But Stuart Mandel has just opined. I would argue that Stuart is one of the most important people in college football media in the country. He's the college football editor of The Athletic, and he has just put out in his column and on social media the following. He said, NIL and the portal didn't kill interest in college football, but the Big Ten and the SEC are well on their way to alienating 75% of the country with their ludicrous CFP plan. More money, but at what cost? That was his tweet. His column, and I'm not going to read you more than a paragraph or two, but I think you'll get the idea very quickly. Headline, Arrogance of Big Ten SEC leaders on full display in New Orleans college football meetings, a picture of Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey. And he's essentially saying that the SEC and the Big Ten's arrogance is about to blow the whole thing up. Now, again, we could bring Ari Wasserman back here and accuse me again of being an existential threat to college football because I was complaining about Indiana and SMU and all this. But ultimately, this is how the rest of college football is going to react to what is going on. Now, we as SEC fans, or those of you who aren't, can sit here and scream and holler. It's not going to matter. The criticism, the critique, and the criticism is not going to matter. This has been building for some time, and Mandel finishes his column by saying, "But at what cost? The Big Ten and the SEC have by far the most national brand programs between them, and that will always get the highest TV ratings in the biggest crowds, but they also comprise just 25% of all FBS schools. It's not generally a winning formula to alienate 75% of your customers, but the two ruling parties are only governing for themselves." So I asked the audience, not to be a professor here, what does that mean? What is that portending? Do the commissioners of the SEC and the Big Ten, who will meet with those other commissioners next week in Dallas, are they particularly concerned if the rest of college football does not like what they are doing? Are they essentially telling the rest of college football to go jump in a lake? That we will move on with or without you, and quite frankly, we're capable of moving on without you. I throw that up as conversation because this is a huge seismic story that we are talking about here and that we will watch unfold later in this week. The reaction will be more like Mandel than it will than from some of you calling in. But that is where we are on a very important inflection point in college athletics. We'll take a short break here. More of your phone calls right after this.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Back. So one more thing on the playoff. John Talty, who everyone knows here, been with us always, has done a compilation of what, if you put the prospect of what the SEC and the Big Ten are doing, and you go back and apply that to the most recent playoff, how would it look? You'd have Oregon and Georgia as the first two seeds, and that would be it. You would do away with all the convoluted matchups that we just had to suffer through. And the rest of the playoffs would look like this. You'd have Texas as the number 3 seed hosting Iowa State. Iowa State would get in as you add more teams. This is a 14-team playoff. The next matchup would be Clemson at Penn State. Then you would have Arizona State at Notre Dame. How about this game? Alabama at Ohio State, SMU at Tennessee, and Indiana at Boise State. Do you think that would have been a better first round than what we all had to suffer through? Pretty miserable games across the board on December 19th and 20th. Let's get back to the calls. That's John Talty from CBS Sports. Let's get to Joe in South Carolina. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Paul. How you doing, man?
We are doing great. Thank you.
Got a couple of things for you. First, if the gentleman from Philadelphia is still listening, I have a suggestion for him.
Go for it.
He and his friends ought to drive down to Columbia, South Carolina. That's the closest place, SEC team,
right?
I believe, from Philly. South Carolina, I believe, is going to have a really good team. They play Alabama at home on October the 25th.
That would be a great game.
Should be a fantastic game, assuming they can get tickets. The second thing, I agree with you about Mr. Mandel and how knowledgeable he is, but quite frankly, being an SEC fan for over 70 years, I really don't care about the other 75% of the teams. I mean, I really believe you got the SEC and the Big Ten, and really what else matters?
Yeah, I mean, it's you could there are a lot of comparisons in the world, but I won't go there because it's too important. But ultimately, this has been trending for some time.
Sure.
Why, on one level, should we care whether Iowa State or NC State gets screwed? That's a question I ask. Yeah. I'm interested in the best possible matchups, not making everybody happy.
There you go. Well, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Now, again, if we're sitting there, I mean, if you go to enough guys like Mandel, Ari Wasserman, all these other guys hate the mentality of the SEC, and now they're going to hate the mentality of the Big Ten because these are the two power brokers. I mean, there's if you have a conscience and you've always been a fan of being inclusive, then you're not going to like this very much, but sometimes you do have to move on. I mean, it's the same thing as what we've seen in retail. We've seen it in business. Smaller companies, as great as they are, and as much as we like to go into a mom and pop, have a more difficult time fighting off the Targets and the Walmarts of the world. Now, the Big 12 and the ACC and other leagues are going to have a pretty difficult time fighting off the superpowers, which are the SEC and the Big Ten. It doesn't make it right. You can debate that from a moral standpoint all day long, every day. Roger is up next in North Carolina. Hello, Roger.
Hello, Paul.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul Finebaum. I've been trying to talk to you for God knows how long.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to have you.
Well, I just got two questions I've always wanted to ask, Paul. I didn't go to college at Florida, but my wife and my two daughters did.
Okay.
Both of them are law graduates. and we were down there at homecoming this year, and Tebow asked Emmitt Smith, who was talking about the IAL. I'm from Brooks County, Georgia.
Yes, sir.
And was asking about the IAL, and Tebow asked him how much they paid Kermit Emmitt Smith to play at Georgia, play at Florida.
Right.
And they did pay him, but he would not say.
Yeah, I was. I think if I remember, I was standing right next to Tebow when he did.
Well, I know. Yeah, I know you were.
Yeah.
I was in the hotel room waiting on 3 girls to get ready to go tailgate. And
listen, I remembered Emmitt Smith.
Waiting on a woman.
Emmitt Smith was
He
recruited.
just looked at him and wrote. I love Emmitt Smith. I've met him. I met him. But another question. My grandson, he got a full academic ride to go to the University of Florida, and he tries to play football. He's not big, but he got a full scholarship to go play at Western North Carolina, up here,
right
outside of Asheville, outside of Marion.
Sure.
For Kerwin Bell. And do you remember who Kerwin Bell was?
Oh, he was a quarterback, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's a quarterback at the University of Florida, and a pretty damn good one.
He was. He sure was.
And coached high school football in Florida for years. And he got a full ride over there to go play football, but I think he could get a better education at the University of Florida than he could over there.
Well, I don't know anything about Western Carolina. I mean, I know where it is, but the University of Florida.
Well, it's a banking school, and it's a banker school, and hell, I don't know.
Hey, bottom line is this: the University of Florida is one of the best schools in the country. Hey, by the way, thank you for the call. And I know more about Emmitt Smith's recruiting because he almost went to Auburn, and the fact that he turned Auburn down to go to Florida told me a lot. Thank you for the call. We appreciate it. Michael is up next in Georgia. Hey, Michael.
Hi. Hi, Paul. I was wondering if you think DJ Lagway will be a Heisman candidate next year, and how far Florida will make it next season, if they'll make it to the 12-team playoff or 14.
Yeah, Michael, I think he will be a Heisman candidate when the season begins, and it really depends on how well Florida handles its schedule. As you know, it's a very difficult schedule. So I think he'll be a candidate. I don't think he'll win because I think Florida's schedule simply is too difficult. Augie is in New Orleans. Hello, Augie.
Hey, Paul, let me answer that question. No, he will not win the Heisman Trophy, and I really doubt he gets invited to New York. But, Paul, did you compare the SEC to Walmart?
I did, yes.
If you had to put the SEC into a retail bracket, a retail store, you call us Walmart, not Neiman Marcus?
I tell you why Walmart would be my example. Neiman Marcus may be a snooty, specialized store that very few people can afford to shop at, but Walmart has essentially taken over the world, and you and I know how they were able to do it by being cheaper than the mom and pops. And that's what really happened. So that's just my analysis, but my knowledge of retail is fairly limited, Augie.
Well, Paul, I hear you're moving to Alabama. It's all over the internet.
That's the rumor I heard too.
It's a big house with a big price tag, so you should be easily able to shop at Neiman Marcus, Paul. But as far as, are you going to commute every weekend, or what are you going to do?
Augie, I have no answer for you on that.
Well, I know you can get a few helicopters, but these days I think it's safer to travel in the car. Paul, what's a nine SEC game schedule going to do for the SEC? How is that going to help us out in terms of the playoffs?
It probably really won't help out in terms of the playoff because that means everyone will have another loss. Well, half of the schools will have another loss.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how that's supposed to be a big advantage for the SEC.
Well, the SEC, I think, is trying to mirror what I think, I'll let the commissioner speak. They're trying to mirror what the Big Ten is doing, even though it's not apples to apples. And I think by getting the automatic qualifier, they're adding an extra game, which will bring the SEC a lot of money, though. That's the most important thing to remember.
Well, I mean, it'll be a more interesting game because, I mean, I'm tired of playing teams like,
I agree.
you know.
I think that's it. I think the SEC should have gone to 9 2 years ago, and when they didn't, they stood out, and I think they're doing the right thing. Whether somebody gets knocked out of the playoffs or not, that's not really my problem.
Well, one last thing, Paul. I hear Mark Stoops is looking for your new address so he can find you after all the nasty things you said about him that are all over the internet.
Well, Mark Stoops is welcome to come over anytime.
All right. Take care, Paul. Thanks.
He's going to have to navigate the security system, though. We'll take a short break, and we are coming right back.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Back, and so is Don calling us from Alabama. Hello, Don.
Hey, good to talk to you, Paul. Haven't talked to you in a while. It's going to be good to have you back here in Birmingham.
Thank you very much.
I know you're looking forward. My wife just pulled up your house. It looks like something you've really earned, you and your wife. I was a little bit curious if your wife, and didn't want to get too personal, if she was going to join back the medical practice, or is she retiring?
That's funny because I had a former patient ask me that very question today. I don't think she's made a decision yet on what she's going to do.
Yeah, I go to that group, and one of my regrets was I never got to meet her and walk down the hall from Dr. Hall.
Well, hey, by the way, your doctor was my doctor as well.
Oh, David B. Yeah, his son is a doctor. Yeah.
David Hall was my doctor in Birmingham, and I saw him. Saw him in about 2 years ago. He was up in Knoxville for
he
Tennessee,
talked
Alabama
to me
game.
about that because I spoke to him regarding that. I was at that game. I was at the game where Alabama actually lost last. So
exactly.
I didn't go this year. I wanted to chat with you a little bit about a couple of different things. I've decided that you have to be kind of at least pretty much an idiot if your name is John. If you call your show, and even Johnny B is a little bit kind of out there. He's decent, but John from St. Louis, my wife and I were out in that area and went through that area of Colorado and didn't ride I don't know if it's a cog railroad or what, but it's in the mountains, I'm sure, but he's got to be kind of out there. But anyway, and then where is John the judge from?
He's from East Tennessee.
Okay. Well, I know the fellow from Maryville's an intelligent lawyer. I enjoy
William from Maryville, yeah.
Yeah, we used to go through there a lot. I was wanting to mention something to you, too. I think Alabama, on the basketball game, they needed more defense. The defense is what killed them. Auburn really has the defense. I was worried about that game, and I don't look for much success at Auburn for Alabama, being a Bama fan. But I am glad they're going to the 9 games, trying to cover a few things. As a person who goes to the games, I'm tired of seeing the directional schools, Mercer, Chattanooga, and whatever else. Yeah, and let me finish with this. You've spoken, I think, to John, the judge, regarding the Holocaust, and I saw a special about Auschwitz the other day wasn't on PBS, but it was something else. A few years ago, was privileged to go with a group of people from my church. We used to have a 39ers group, the old folks. I was one of the youngers. I just turned 70 last year. And we went, and it's not far away. It's in your home state, to a school in Whitwell, Tennessee.
Really?
Whitwell is in the area up above Chattanooga. And we specifically went there, and we went to something down at South Pittsburgh, which is back down there,
I know that is.
Nickajack Lake, or I think it's the lake that's on the Tennessee before it comes into Alabama. And they have an exhibition of one of the train cars that was used at the school, at the high school in Whitwell, Tennessee. I used to have a friend who lived up above there, who was a dear friend of mine that passed away up on that mountain that you're familiar with, that you have to go over from Chattanooga to Nashville if you're going on the interstate, some seventh wonder of the world. But it's very interesting to go to, and we were able to go inside the school where they had the Holocaust exhibit and copies of the Torah, things that people that they had communicated with were glad to give them for their study of the atrocities that happened. And paper clips, they started collecting paper clips, which represented the number of people that were killed, and people donated paper. That was a thing that happened with that. You may be familiar with from your heritage, having known that. But it's really worth going to, and I'm sure they'd let you in.
No, I've never heard that. I have been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington D.C., which is literally a harrowing thing. One of the things I've always wanted to go to Auschwitz. One day I will get there because I've talked to so many survivors and people, and I don't think until you see it firsthand, and I know you have seen a variation of it, you can comprehend exactly what it was all about.
Yeah, this is I think about the women that were in there. It was focused on that, on a couple of two sisters that ended up surviving it, and I don't know where they said they lived, but it was quite moving.
Well, listen, thanks for sharing that with us, Don. Really good to talk to you. I can't wait to see you when we get back there. We are heading to the break right now. It's been a busy show. A lot of news dropped by Ross Dellinger 2 hours ago. We'll recap some of that. We talked about the basketball game in Tuscaloosa. There was a game in Columbia yesterday that we will address as well.
Thank you for listening to the Best of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast. Watch the Paul Finebaum Show weekdays from 3 to 7 Eastern on the SEC Network. Plus, you can listen and watch on the ESPN app.